And guys, guess what? Horrible news, very sad news. This is our final episode of the season. of the season. we're not going anywhere. Well, kind of, but
This man is baiting everyone.
as the semester is coming to an end, we had started to reflect a little bit more about, our experiences from first year all the way to our final semester, and just started to think about all the crazy events and scenarios that have challenged us to the point where we almost dropped out, and all of the amazing moments that kept us going. We know architecture school is extremely hard and overwhelming, and if you're in a situation right now where you're thinking about what are you even doing in architecture school, like, is this for me? Like, can I even do this thing? Maybe listening to our stories can help you out.
Yeah. In this episode, we wanted to let you know that you can make it in your program and it's possible between all the toxic professors, the burnout, the uninteresting projects that you had to deal with, and all while losing passions for design. We've experienced each one through our 5 years in school as well.
Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to really hone in on that for this episode.
So, yeah, print out your final boards, relax, and let's reminisce on the hard times and the good times. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to another episode of the Crit Room Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan, with my co-host,
Albert, just Albert.
But no, it's crazy to think that the semester has flown past so quickly. Now that we're graduated, it feels like we just have lost track of how fast the year moves in a semester. Like, it's already been a full school year, like 16 weeks. Like, we've gone through 16 episodes. I can't even fathom how that works. So we wanted to start off this episode really by just walking through every single year that we've gone through, first year all the way to fifth year, and talk about two moments specifically in each one. We want to address our dropout moments for each of us, and we want to talk about the moments that kept us going. We were just talking over the outline of this episode. We were trying to think about, was there only one specific moment that was really, really bad that made us want to drop out? And then after we started to talk through a couple stories, we were realizing, like, hey, actually, there, I mean, really think back on it, there was something in every single year, almost every single semester, that just was like, yeah, I don't know if this is for me. But then every single semester, there was kind of something else that was like, I think we can make this work.
Yeah, we can make this work. There's always some hardships, but then in the end, for some reason, you're always just like, I'm sticking through it. This is kind of fun. But maybe it's just like the toxicity in us. But you know how people are like, I want red flags in my relationship. Like, what the?
Yeah,
it's kind of like that, being stuck in a really kind of toxic situation. But because you learned a few things, it's kind of fun.
Okay, so let's just get going, shall we? So first semester, I think the biggest moments that really stood out to me is this was the first time that was, just getting to the routine of everything, getting used to the routine of college, getting used to the fact that I was in a whole new place that I didn't know any people there. So I had no friends at that point in time, and just, trying to work out, just being independent for the first time and managing my own schedule, trying to figure out how I'm going to get to and from classes all the time and everything. So there's just a lot to try and get used to all at the same time. And with that, just also took getting to recognize how long things took in architecture school. It's just a lot of work, and you don't really anticipate how long it's going to take you to draw, because when's the last time you really took notice before college? How long does it take you to make a drawing? I mean, every time you've been doing a drawing, it's just been for fun or something, right? So you never pay attention to these things. So I remember specifically, there were many moments where I was just starting to gain a lot of FOMO. And I know we talked about this on another episode, so I don't want to overly press on that same story all the time. But it was just one of those things where, going back to the dorms, when you're living amongst everybody else that's not in architecture, you start to realize just how different everyone else's routines are, how different their lifestyles are. And it may be regret is the word that I'm coming up with, but it's just like, man, why is architecture school so different? Why is why am I the one that's having to wake up so early and then come back so late, and everyone
Yeah,
else is just chilling in the dorm rooms and just playing like Smash Bros or something? I'm like, I
yeah,
feel like I'm missing out on everything, especially like when it's their first year and you're just trying to get to know everybody, you know?
yeah. If it's like in economics terms, it'd be like what cost opportunity because you go to like because you go to studio, you're losing on the opportunities to hang out with your friends and stuff in
Yeah.
dorms. I never
So
really
I
had
just
this problem.
remembered that moment really sucked where I can't say it was to the extreme of like, oh, I wanted to drop out because it was just the first semester and I just wanted to get used to things.
Hmm.
But I remember that was just like a very, very hard hitting challenge that I was
Hmm.
stuck battling because, again, I was happy to get along with my studio friends and everything, but I was so frustrated that I couldn't spend more time with the people who weren't in the college. I'm
Hmm.
just like, oh, why can't I hang out with some people from my leadership class or something? And
Yeah.
like I would sometimes, but it just wouldn't be all the time because I would be in studio all the time.
Hmm.
So I remember those were one of those things where it's like, man, did I did I mess up? Like
Yeah.
this
If you
whole
had like
college experience, quote unquote, it's not through architecture.
you're like if I had gone to a different major, would my life still be the same? And
Literally.
yeah, I think everyone's gonna have that. I definitely had that point in my life too when I was in first year. I don't know, because the transition before you even go to college, you stay with your family in high school, you hang out with your friends, and that type of stuff. With me, it was just like League of Legends and stuff like that, making friends online and also just playing games with friends online. And so the transition point for me was because I was in Maryland at that point, and then when I went to school in Kansas, I was kind of all by myself, all like, and it's just like, because I never went to the dorms. I never lived in dorms. I was living in apartments by myself or with my sibling, but that was it. And so I didn't really feel the same way as you, Ryan, where there was like, I felt like I was missing out. But I think my point was like, because it started to feel like I was by myself and like
Hmm.
I had that the independence. I kind of wanted to go at it with like I can do anything that I want. I can go party. I can do any
Yeah.
like anything that I wanted. I could make it happen. But then went to school, and then professors are like, "Hey, I'm gonna give you 10 years worth of homework," and I'm like, "What?"
Due by next Monday.
Yeah, and I'm like, what the hell? Like, why? What? And then I remember they assigned it. So we probably talked about this already, but they assigned us a ton of diagrams, and at the time, I was super perfectionist. Like, most architecture students, if you go into architecture, you're gonna be perfectionist no matter what. But
Yeah.
anyway, I remember I had opened up the trace paper, and then you know how people just rip it out from there. I
Hmm.
had grabbed an X-Acto blade with a ruler and just cut the paper. I
This
was, I
dude.
was, I was so perfect. Like I was such a perfectionist that I was just like, I need to make everything super perfect when I cut things. And it didn't help that like when professors were like, "I'm gonna give you a shit ton of work," I was like, okay, I can do this. I'll take your challenge. And because I took up the challenge, I felt like I was missing out on a lot of things. Um, I was not
Yeah.
sleeping at all. Like every project, I had like one all nighter. I think because I didn't
Hmm.
know at the time how to balance my time and like what do I need to. I didn't know what my calculus was for in terms of how much time each work was gonna take, and so I would be not sleeping at all that much, and it was just hard. It was hard.
It's just, yeah, like so much workload to figure out, and you're doing a whole bunch of different stuff that you're never exposed to until then, usually.
Hmm.
So it's just on top of how long it takes to just draw things by hand, you're also having to research what it is or just ask around the class, like, does anybody know how to do this thing?
Hmm.
It's just like it just takes so much extra time. I remember too, there were many nights where I would just be there until like 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning on the regular or something.
Hmm.
Maybe once a week or something that would happen. But I knew towards the production weeks that was when everything got pretty challenging because it would be a lot of those moments where it's just you realize you've been sitting in the same room for
Hmm.
hours on hours and hours
Hmm.
to the point where I I think I said this before too on a different episode. I remember walking out the hallways checking the time on my phone, taking a Snapchat at the moment, just to, like, record it for history. Be like,
Yeah.
wow, I think that was the longest I've ever stayed in the room in my entire life. It was like 5:30 in the morning. I'm like, oh my god, I got to be back here at like 8 tomorrow morning.
Little did he know this was the rest of his life.
Facts.
No, that reminds me, Ryan. I remember. I don't know if I talked about this before, but during my first semester and first year, we had the final project with those the spatial extensions project. So
Hmm.
basically, like it was super abstract. You have boss or like basswood sticks. I think some people like use trace paper. Some people use like museum board. But we were essentially trying to make cubes, or how to translate these abstract cube into the landscape that was super abstract too. I don't know. It's hard to,
Yeah,
but
it was a
I mean,
weird project.
yeah, I remember that specific project because that specific project actually made me was like, I was like, I'm not cut out for architecture because whenever I presented my project during desk crits, my professors was like, this ain't it, this ain't it, like something's not
Really?
working here. Yeah, no, it was hard, and so because she kept saying that, it felt like every day was a grind session for me where I stayed until like 3 a.m. because I wanted to make the project itself like the concept just wasn't there, and when the concept
Yeah.
isn't there, it's hard to make a project. And
Especially when
so
you don't really know what a concept is in first year either, you
yeah,
know?
yeah, and so my professor just kept saying that this isn't working, this isn't working. I had no idea how to like approach that because bro, I'm a first year, I don't know how to do this shit. And so I remember staying up late nights during that time. I was actually debating whether I should stay in architecture school because of it.
Yeah, because before moving into like the pros, the things that kept us going, to me it's just first year is literally such a make it or break it year. And I can't figure out how much of that is done intentionally by the program just to weed out the people who are quote unquote weak and just can't handle it versus the ones who, like what you were just saying, like we eventually did make it all the way through, but we were like that close to not wanting to do it. So then
Hmm.
part of me is trying to figure out, like, is this designed, are they trying to do this to us,
There's like
and why is it made so difficult? Why can't it be like an easy little, here's a gentle introduction to this idea,
Mhm.
and then you can figure out if you like it or not.
Yeah, maybe we're just too coddled as like as high school
We're
students.
just snowflakes.
But yeah, I don't know. That was like a hard thing though. But I do remember there were a lot of good moments that made me like stay with architecture because of it.
Yeah, I
Um,
think for mine, still being in first year, was my second semester. Because for those of you who aren't really familiar with how the K State program works, we first start out our years of architecture school in ENVD. This is where everybody goes, regardless of what discipline you want to do. And the first year is really just a glorified art class, really. I mean, a lot of it is just you work on a whole bunch of different kinds of projects,
yeah.
but it's at a certain point, and it comes more towards the second semester, you start to be introduced a lot more of these projects that fine tune your desires into one discipline versus another.
Hmm.
So that second semester was really when I started to figure out a lot more of like, oh, there's a difference between art and design, or there's a difference
Hmm.
between just being an artist and a designer. And
Hmm.
those things started to really get me to have a lot more fun in the school because it started to feel more like, oh, I'm actually starting to learn things. I'm actually starting to be able to apply a lot of the stuff that we're reading in these textbooks to the actual projects that we're doing. And the professors getting us to really think about things in a whole different way
Yeah.
than I've ever thought about stuff before. Like before,
Yeah.
I was just drawing buildings that looked cool, but now it's like, oh, actually, you can be intentional about how it is cool. And that's
Hmm.
the part that started to really get me to think, like, this architecture school might actually be kind of a cool thing.
Yeah.
But another part of that is, I think one of the biggest parts that got me to really want to push towards the next year is because I had gotten some pretty decent praise from that professor in
Mm.
second year or second semester, because like a couple of my works were, I guess, quote unquote, featured in the class. Like it would
Mm.
be one of them
He's
is
an
right here.
architecture digest.
Like this lightsaber poster, I think that was like the coolest part of the entire school experience. But it
Yeah.
was just we got to do a product design, and our professor was like, you can design literally anything, you just have to make a poster about it, show us how it works.
Mhm.
I was just joking about it. I'm like, oh, can I do a lightsaber? And he's like, actually, why not? I'm like, oh, wait, I gotta do this now. Never would I've guessed, but for some reason, somehow, that project had been basically glued to the walls of Seton Hall, and I had to fight tooth and nail to be able to take it off those walls and bring it with me, because I'm like, I worked hard for that. I want to keep that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think I ever. Oh no, I took. That was in my 5th year. Though. I took the one thing that we pinned up on the walls, and I was like, I'm taking this with me because
Yeah, same.
this is an art piece. The thing is, this thing's nice. I don't think I ever told them either. I was just like, I'm taking this. But if you're listening to this,
Fast forward.
yeah, just ignore what everything I said if you're listening to this point. But yeah, I think the thing that made me really stay with architecture during the first year, it was also in second semester. So during my first first year, I was really enamored, or like I really loved geometry. And so when I went to second year or second semester for the first year for the final project, I got to build this where like I it was probably like the most insane geometry that I've ever made by hand. And so I was really proud of it, and it was just like, dude, this is
Was this
really
your
fun.
artist refuge?
Yeah, this was the artist refuge, and
Yeah.
that thing was just, oh man, I had so much fun trying to figure out what the geometry would look like, and then how the living space would actually feel inside the refuge itself. And dude, that was fun. I remember my professor at that time too. She was like, this is a an art piece. She was just like, I kind of want this for myself. And I was like, dude, I want this for myself. I don't know what you
It's like,
but
gee, that sucks because I'm keeping this. So
yeah, no, because everything was it was in was it what scale was that? One eighth or one? It was
probably, I think it
one
was
eighth
1 8
or
ago.
yeah. It was like, and everything was just so detailed. I put the cabinets on the like the was a Murphy bed. And it was just like it was yeah, it was nice.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was just the encouragement from the professors is really just what kept me going.
Hmm.
If because I say that because I had arguably one of the most strict professors for my first ever semester at K State,
Yeah.
Professor Goat. Shout out. And right next door to us was the second most, or if not the most strict architecture professor.
Oh
So it's
no.
like, if you think about it, in your studio, that's your bubble. That's all
Hmm.
you know. It's just those four walls, your studio desk, and the other studios
Hmm.
people and everything else.
Yeah.
So if your only experience is you're walking in, you're hearing your professor and you're hearing the other professor, who are both the most strict in the building, are like, your stuff is crap. Here's a C. They're like, oh my god, like,
Yeah.
do I have what it takes? And then the second semester just said, yes, you do have
Yeah.
it what it takes.
Yeah.
So then that's where I made me realize, like, wow, there's such a dynamic range of architecture professors.
Yeah. No, I remember. Oh, that reminds me of like you're talking about the professors. The professor that said that they wanted to keep my project, that one, the artist refuge, was also the one that told me in the beginning of the semester that I should just go into planning because I don't know if
What?
she didn't know that I was gonna make it out as in architecture.
Bruh.
Little did she know I had to prove her wrong. So
Sure, what time it is. Yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, I think that's kind of the biggest wrap up of the first year. It's just recognizing that encouragement goes a long way, as corny or cheesy as that sounds. I didn't really think I needed it until reflecting on it just now. Like
Hmm.
how important that was to have that harsh criticism, to know, like, yeah, you can take a beating and just keep going with it. But then
Hmm.
having the praise to be like, hey, you, if you put your efforts into it and you find those moments where you tend to shine through, like, you can do this. If you find the
Hmm.
passion and the encouragement through it, then yeah, you should do it.
Hmm. 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 Yeah.
So let's bring it into second year, shall we?
Yeah. Dude,
So
was this?
second year, because this is now our first official year of architecture school. We had done our applications after we figured out which one we wanted to do, and then we got a little bit of a a letter or something saying, "Congrats, you made it." And you're like, "Woo, all right, let's go."
Yeah.
So I remember walking in first semester, second year, being like, "Man, this is where it gets good. This is where we start to learn the secrets of architecture. This is where we get to learn all
Uh,
the things." And we're
yeah.
met with a professor that just probably was a couple years past when he probably should have retired.
He was just staying in so that he could get the monies. I mean, fair, fair. That's
It's yeah. And we're not saying that to be overly harsh or critical or anything, but you'll see why. Because essentially the whole entire semester turned to be just this round circle of stickers and hot dog references and Blade Runner and do you guys know Drake? And you guys should find some other fifth years because I don't want to teach you. And what about them Pritzker folks that you should just Google on your own? I'm like, why are we paying to go to school when the professor who we're supposed to be paying is not even teaching us? It's the fifth years who just got dragged into this. They're poor souls. They're rich from their studio chairs working on their thesis project and said, "Hey, here's this tiny squirt of a second year. You need to teach them how to do their stuff." And they're like, "What?" Okay.
I remember he would just like every time at the beginning of studio, he'd be like, "All right, let's go to this crit room," and we will go to the crit room, and he's like, "Okay, pin up your best drawing of the day," and then everyone pin up the
Yep.
drawing, and then there would be stickers on the
3
table.
hours later.
There'd be stickers on the table. Everyone would have to pick up a sticker and be like, vote on which drawing do you think is the best drawing. And so everyone would just like boop, 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 boop. And then everyone and the person that would get the most stickers would be like, he'd point it out, he's like, who did this?
It just felt like such a waste of time.
Yeah.
I won't lie, there were some moments during those things where you took something away from it,
Yeah.
but it was just so frustrating because now that you're finally starting this architecture journey, right? And the whole entire time you're not actually being taught anything substantial about the architecture. You're kind of just figuring out on your own. And I know some people might say that, oh, that is a kind of teaching style. If you can figure it out on your own, then that has a certain merit to it. But I would argue and say, no, I'm paying a lot of money to this person. They should teach me how to do things. I don't know. I'm a second year person, technically a first year architect. What am I supposed to teach myself? I don't know it.
I would understand if he had like some really ambiguous question that he wanted answered for the day. So it'd be
Yeah.
like, do you know what the purpose of a section is? And then for that day, you'd be like, okay, well, what is the purpose of a section? Why do we draw sections? And so then, like, it's a teaching moment of it's a general question, but then the general question is answered by your own exploration, right?
Yeah.
And so that would be another way of teaching. Like, that's free hands. You're just asking one major question, and then you let the students figure it out by themselves. But with him, everyone just pin up drawings on the freaking wall, and then after 1 hour of talking, he'd just leave. Nothing else. Like we were left.
Leave
by
a plate of
ourselves.
cookies on the table and then just
After 1 hour, he just left, and we had
Yeah.
like what 4 hours left. Oh my god, no way.
Yeah. So this all ties into the moment where I just felt the highest level of challenge and just biggest moments of regret, if not like wanting to basically quote unquote drop out, is when it got to our final critiques, our final crit. And after I was done presenting everything and just doing the best that I possibly thought I could, and realizing after the jurors who have never seen any of our projects and never talked to us about anything, they just sit down and just blindly start roasting it for like very fair reasons because none of us know what we're doing as second or first semester architecture students, really. And it just was that moment where it's like all these things could have been fixed, could have been addressed, could have been brought up by the professor way earlier on in this whole process. And I just felt so let down and betrayed, where it's like, what is the point of this architecture school if I'm not even going to be able to lean on my professor who's supposed to teach me how to do things the right and wrong ways?
Yeah.
So then it was just one of those things where that's kind of why I wanted to drop out. It's not necessarily like, oh, it got too hard or anything. It was more of like if I'm paying for this school and this school isn't even going to teach me, what are we doing here, man?
Are the rest of the architecture professors exactly like this guy?
Yeah, because this is the first, again, we're just it's so early in the journey. We have no idea what's waiting ahead of us,
Yeah.
right? So you can only speculate based off of your own experiences. And it's just, I don't know. That was a really hard hitting moment for me because I just felt so betrayed and just wasted so much time.
Mhm. The same, same. I think it was just. I think it was the segue I would go into is the moment that made me want to stay because of that specific moment. Just to really clarify the situation, felt like we paid so much money. We paid like what 4,000. I don't know how much money you paid, but like it was
I don't remember.
thousands of dollars for that specific class. But then the professor would never come. He would come in for 1 hour and then leave and never teach you anything. And so I felt frustrated. I was like, "What the? I'm spending so much money on this shit, and it's not. I'm not getting taught
Yeah,
anything."
I'm spending money to learn.
Yeah, and then so I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to other classes and other studios and learning from them because fuck
Hmm.
this shit. I paid for this stuff. I pay for my education, and my education should also mean that I get to learn from other professors at the same time. So I said,
Hmm.
I'm walking into Professor Wholesome's studio, and I was like, oh, dude, the way that he talks about architecture is so interesting. He thinks about architecture as drama. So like the things that make you feel gentle, makes you feel like you're relaxed, and then all of a sudden you get to a space. It's like, oh wow, now everything. It's like there's the
Loud and
climb.
dramatic, and the
Yeah,
contrast of things.
the contrast. It's like the way that he saw art was very similar to the way he sees architecture, and so I learned a lot from him during that semester. And then later on the next semester, I also learned so many things about what makes a project so successful through diagramming. And dude, that
Mm.
I learned so much from the diagrams I from Professor Galaxy Brain. It was crazy. Dude, that's what made me stay in architecture for the second year.
Because now you actually felt like you were learning things. You
Mm-hmm.
got excited about it and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because, okay, mine is very similar to that too. About why I wanted to keep going is because we had Professor Mies 2.0,
Mm-hmm.
and he's very technical. Like, he gets very passionate about details and just how a building is actually constructed in the real world, and pulls a lot of precedents and just shows you the vastness of architecture, if you will, from all different kinds of scales, and can teach you in a way that you can understand without any experience in architecture. That's when it actually felt like, oh, I'm now getting my money's worth here. See, okay, it's a good thing I stuck around because that was great.
Yeah.
And then the worst part about it, and I feel like this is worth mentioning too, because this is unfortunately a part of second year, but it still happened. That's when the Cove happened, the
Mm.
virus that we can't really mention for monetization purposes. And that part also really sucked because in that perspective, the timeline, second semester, we just got a glimpse of these great professors. We got a glimpse of what it actually means to be in architecture, studying architecture, what it's supposed to do, what it's not supposed to do, all these
Mm.
things. And we're getting excited, we're getting very passionate about it. We're just about to go on this trip to Chicago and learn even more about architecture history and walking through it and everything. And then we get an email saying, by the way, this virus thing is happening. Everything's canceled. We might not even meet up for the rest of the semester. And we're like, what?
What did he
What
say?
do you? Oh, what? What do you mean? So that put us all in the situation that we had to deal with across the world of just the hard hitting reality of what architecture really boiled down to. Because now you're no longer in a studio. Now you're no longer surrounded by your friends and studio mates.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're just stuck at your own desk if you have one in your room, or your parents' dining room table, or in the basement somewhere.
Yeah.
And you're just stuck with you, an empty room, and a screen in front of you drawing lines on Rhino. And something about that, just sitting in a singular room, just doing one thing for so long, really, really hit. It was
Mm.
borderline, life crisis realization of what architecture could possibly be.
Ryan
Where it's
hit
like,
the
man, is
midlife
this about to
crisis on the
be
age of
literally,
20.
literally the quarter life crisis hit right then? It's like, this is a career I'm about to choose. Am I really about to sit in front of a computer drawing lines for the rest of my life? And it was just, that was a really, really hard semester at that point
Mm-hmm.
because you are super excited about the passion about architecture, but now you're realizing what it takes to get there.
Hmm.
And then it's like, oh man, is it worth it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think what made me also realize why I stuck with it is because my professor, Professor Galaxy Brain, was super like into technology and all that stuff. And so each day that we would go be in studio, we would be learning other things about Rhino, other things about Illustrator, other things about Photoshop that we would have never learned if we had another professor. Like,
Mm.
like I don't think I would be where I was at in my second year if I didn't have that professor. Because I remember, I think Abby had had the professor that we had in her first semester or second year, and
Yeah.
like he was a really nice professor, but he just didn't have the chops to teach the architecture and technology at the same time because he was
Yeah.
old. He was ancient. Like this man's, if you blow on him, he would fly to like Jupiter or something. I don't know.
The Cove really threw a wrench into everyone's life. Just sitting there in a room really just put it into perspective of what was architecture education and what were you doing. To put it more on the positive aspect, right? Like what kept us going? Because that's a pretty low. So how do you come back from that? And I think for me, it really was, well, there's the two parts, right? We already answered the first one where the architecture professors that knew what they were doing, it made us more passionate about architecture, and that kept us going. But
Hmm.
then to answer the second half of that thing, I think the part when they mentioned an email over the summer, like, hey, good news, we're planning on being in person classes next or like this upcoming fall for your third
Hmm.
year. And, we'll just have a mask and everything, but we'll be in studio. I'm like,
Hmm.
oh, great, cool. So that means we get to visit our friends again. We get to have a studio environment and all the perks that come with it. So
Hmm.
I think as cheap or as surface level as it was, that was enough to get me excited about it again because
Yeah.
I was still passionate about wanting to learn more about architecture. And now I got to realize, oh, I don't have to sit in my room all day. I can at
Hmm.
least go back to the on campus experience.
When you see no one else working on a project around you, it feels like you're not, and there's not enough motivation for you to do your project. Just for reference, usually in fall semester, people would have a break for Thanksgiving, right? They would go home with their family. But I was in
Oh,
Kansas,
right.
and my family was in Maryland, so it would be like very expensive, or I don't know, I don't have much money, so it'd be expensive for me to fly back to Maryland or to travel back to Maryland for like the 18-hour drive or whatever. So typically, I would just stay in Kansas with my younger sister, and we would just have Thanksgiving there. But then during those Thanksgiving, I would try to work on the project so I can get a head start in front of everyone when they come back. But whenever I do go back to studio, there's no one else working there, and because I see no one else working, I don't even feel motivated to work on my project. Like I go in there and
Mm.
stay there for 1 hour. I'm like, ah, this shit's stupid. I can't be here anymore. And so I leave after 1 hour, which is good because I'm supposed to be taking a break anyway. But I understand the feeling of like you lose motivation when there's no one else around you that's working on the project.
Honestly, yeah. With that, I think we can transition into third year next, which starting with the dropout things, this didn't really happen until my second semester, is when I really had that moment of just wanting to drop out. And it just happened to be because of just professor dynamics and just the toxicity of the professors that we had. And I,
Um,
I don't use that word truthfully very often. I
mhm.
use it ironically very often, but that's a whole different point. But genuinely, it was such a toxic environment for me. I know a lot of other people had no problems, no qualms
Yeah,
with this professor, but I felt like I was just a target on my
targeted.
back. It was
Yep.
always
It was
some type of issues with me all the time for
yeah.
whatever reason.
It was
And
you and
I
like
just
two other
know,
people in the
yeah,
studio, and it was just like it was constantly just you three that were being targeted all the time. Everyone else was
yeah.
fine.
And it's just, I don't want to get into the whole thing. We'll have an episode on this topic specifically.
Next season, next
Believe
season.
that. Believe that. To detail that a little bit more, I just remembered always having to deal with that every single studio session, right? But
Yeah.
then it got to the point where, for context, I typically wouldn't visit my family probably more than like every 4 weeks or 6 weeks or something.
Mm-hmm.
Just because like they were a 3 hour drive, I could make it if I wanted to over a weekend and wouldn't have a problem. So if there was ever a break in our studio project, I would just take the weekend home and then come back ready for Monday.
Mm-hmm.
But after just doing that for a holiday break and coming back doing just 1 week, I went back home again. And I was just so mentally drained, so just broken inside,
Mm-hmm.
basically, that it didn't really hit me that it was only 1 week since I last visited my parents until they brought it up to me while we were just walking through a store or something. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
nice that you came back a second week. Like, do you have another break in studio projects? I'm like, last week. What? Like, I just lost all sense of time because of how stressed, how just exhausted I was from having to deal with this all the
Mm-hmm.
time.
Yeah.
And I was realizing, like, man, this is the first time that I've really started to understand what people say when certain conditions in architecture school can really start to impact your health, not just
Mm-hmm.
mentally, but physically too.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of those moments where, again, now I started realizing, is this really the cost of what it means to be in architecture school? Just having to always deal with this, and you don't have any options because they're the professor. They have the higher power over you. You can't really do a whole lot outside of, I don't know, just try to deal with it because they hold the keys to your grades, they hold the keys to your scholarships in extension.
Mm-hmm.
And if you quote unquote send a email to the advisors or something, since you're like one of three people who are targeted, you know what's going to happen. They're going to know where that complaint came from.
Yep. She's like,
So
eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
you
Who
smack,
report?
smack, smack. Oh my god. It's just my brain was so broken and I just didn't think it was worth it. For to practice architecture, was it worth dealing with the BS of a professor even for
Right.
just one semester? And
Mm-hmm.
when I thought about it logically, I'm like, "No, that's stupid. Like why would you drop out for one professor?" But
Mm-hmm.
then I thought about it again. I'm like, "But do it is it supposed to be like this where I just have to keep taking it?"
No.
Like that's just like it sucked. It was
Mm-hmm.
really bad.
Yeah.
And I honestly don't know how I was really able to get through it outside of just the fact that the rest of you guys, like the Crit Room crew and all of our studio mates, we would have a very tight knit
Yeah.
group. And we were all, I mean, most of that was probably trauma bonding, but we all did stuff outside the studio too that just
Yeah.
helps you decompress, maybe, or
Mm-hmm.
just,
We had like a one villain that we all kind of went against, and then
yeah,
it was just like, you know what, f this person, we're gonna enjoy our life. And then
yeah,
we proceeded to play soccer, play volleyball, just do things outside of architecture that
yeah,
we was like, we're taking our life with our own hands now.
yeah.
F this professor.
Yeah.
I remember my dropout moments for third year was, oh dude, that was the time when I was having a breakup, or like I was going through a breakup.
Mm.
And I remember I was just so depressed. And so I would tell Sam, "Hey Sam, I'm going through I'm going through something right now. Do you want to hang out with me on Discord or something?" I don't know if it was Discord. So we'd be working on stuff on the computer, but we'd be watching things on our second screen. Be like, I think it was Avatar: The Last Airbender or something that we were
Oh
watching,
yeah.
and it was just like I felt like I had company that made me not want to drop out, because I was very very close to dropping out at that time because of the, I was going through a lot of things. And then at some point I emailed my advisor. I was like, hey, I'm going through something and I don't think I can do architecture anymore. And she's like, wait, hold a second. Maybe,
Mm-hmm.
because she was like, I know you're a good student. You've always had all A's in your classes. Is it because you've always been having A's? You're such a perfectionist that it feels like that anything less than a perfection in anything that you do, you feel like you're a failure. And I was like, oh, she understands me. And I was like, maybe. And then she was like, okay, I'll talk to your professors. I'll give you 3 days of free time. Just relax. Just make sure that like you are in a mentally healthy, like, part of your life. And I was just like, oh dude, you're a godsend. And oh
Mm.
my god, I was really really close to dropping out third year because of that. And I remember I had to during the final productions of the final project. I remember I had to numb myself and was like, I'm gonna put Queen's Gambit on the side, the TV show, and I
Hmm.
would just work through my project. And I was like, line here, line there, extrude, and it was just like
Yeah.
the most zombie I've ever been in that third year because of that specific moment. It was bad.
Yeah.
It was bad.
So then, how do we keep going? Because those are again some pretty low lows. How do you possibly turn those around, right? So for me, full disclosure, to be honest, the fact that next year for us was meant to be our Italy year, or I guess in Albert's case, his internship
Internship.
year. For me, that was honestly enough to want to keep going because it's just like, that's such a cool experience. I don't want to lose out on that for whatever I
Mhm.
just went through. Like to be in Italy for a whole semester, how freaking cool is that? So the fact that we were about to go study abroad honestly restored my desire to stick it out for the semester and just get over with it. We had a need, or we at least had a support group within our studio where it's just take the punches in studio, vent about it and rant about it afterwards, and
Yeah.
just make it to the next semester.
Hmm.
And that's honestly just what I did. The other part of it too, and granted, the professor was not that great, but the things that she talked about, the things that she taught, the projects that we did, the methods that she introduced into our process were all incredible.
God
It
tier.
it rejuvenated my love for architecture because after Mies 2.0 from the previous semester,
Hmm.
or previous year, I mean, he was so technical about architecture. And while that's cool, it doesn't feel very fulfilling to me. It
Yeah.
feels like there's supposed to be something else to architecture than just joinery details and whatever else,
Yeah.
and just basic forms turned into blocks or whatever else.
Yeah. You're
So,
missing the soul.
yeah, the art in the architecture.
Yeah.
And Professor Hits Different introduced that part to us. And that's what made me realize that, wow, there's a whole new realm to
Hmm.
this architecture stuff. Like a multiverse just opened up,
Hmm.
basically. So that's also made me realize, like, okay, we've had this happen now quite a bit where we just have like a coin flip of professors. You either have a good one or a bad one. If you have a good one, the bad one probably happens next, and you get back to a good one.
Yeah.
So in my head, I'm like, okay, that's enough rationale for me to at least understand it's just a luck of the draw. You either
Hmm.
make it out or you don't. And it's just quote unquote character development. And I'm better for it, right?
Yeah.
So that was that was my keep going moment.
So remember how I said I was really like that semester, the first semester of third year, I was debating whether I should drop out or keep going. I think
Mm-hmm.
the last on the presentation days for everyone to do their project. I presented my project. I was like, cool, cool. Everyone's getting nominated for their final. Whoever the finalist for that studio is, they're gonna
Mm-hmm.
compete in the Bowman, and then those people are gonna go present their projects in front of the all of the school. And so I was like, cool, cool. And I was super numb, and I was like, I did not want to be in architecture anymore. But then by chance, I went to studio that specific day and watched some other people's presentations for their project. And I had met Ryan, Sully. We weren't good friends at the time either. I had met Ryan and Sully and their crew. I think you guys were called the Bellum Boys or whatever. But
Yeah. Wow, I forgot about that for a second.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, you guys were called the Bellum Boys at the time, and I was like, oh, cool. I talked to you guys, and then you guys were like, hey, we're gonna go to IHOP real quick. We're gonna go eat some food and celebrate the final presentations. I was like, cool, cool. And I was just like, I was numb at that point. I was just like, cool, cool, I'll join you.
Just
And
being
then
dragged along, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And then so we went to IHOP, and then it made me realize you guys inviting me to that specific moment to go to IHOP to eat dinner and just enjoy architecture or enjoy life, and having a conversation with you guys about your passions about architecture reinvigorated my love for architecture at that time. Like you don't realize, you Ryan and Sully and all those people I talked to, I don't think you realize how much you guys have helped me because of that
Literally
specific
did
moment.
not know.
Yeah, that was that specific moment, I was just like, I'm about to quit architecture. I went to dinner with you guys, and then you were like, we love architecture. I was like, oh, dude, this is what it
Maybe I
feels.
love architecture too.
Yeah, it was that specific moment was a big turnaround for me at that time.
Dude, that's so crazy.
Yeah,
That literally just small, almost insignificant things, right? Just
yeah,
going to a dinner
yeah, yeah.
literally turned your life around, or I don't know how you want to phrase it, but
No,
changed the
because
course of where you were going in life
yeah,
for
because
just a dinner.
I remember because I was like I did not love my project because it felt like my project was hijacked by my professor. We had like this weaving
Mm.
thing that was going on with Professor Mushroom, and Professor Mushroom was like, your boys and girls club should have this weaving story to it." I'm like, bro, but like that's weaving is nice and all, but like
It's
that's
such a
not.
manufactured story or
Yeah,
manufactured concept.
yeah, it felt like I was trying to force in a concept that had no business being forced into. And so I at that point I was just like, is this how architecture is going to be? I feel like I have no control over my project. I have no more passions for architecture anymore. And then yeah, just having dinner with you guys kind of like flipped that around almost instantaneously.
Yeah. Dude, that's insane. That's so crazy. Well, okay, so let's move on to fourth year now. So, beginning with the dropout moment again. So, this was a very weird semester for us because, at least for my specific studio, it was set up in a way where it was sponsored, I guess, by a local firm in Kansas City. And they would just come in on studio days and rotate three professors, one on Monday,
Mm-hmm.
one on Wednesday, one on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
So that was already pretty weird and strange to get used to because no longer are you just bouncing the opinions and the feedback of one professor, but now you have three professors, quote
Mm.
unquote,
Yep.
with all different focuses, all different niches and passions, and all different types of critiques
Mm-hmm.
on your project. One person on Monday might say, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea. Keep it going." Person on Wednesday has no preference; they don't really care. And then person on Friday is like, "Who told you to do that? That's not a right thing." So you're
Yep.
like, "Oh, what the? Okay, well, I'm glad I wasted a week doing that then." So that was just one of the challenges that came about with that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
But really, where it started to turn into a dropout moment is not necessarily studio related. It just happened to be everything was happening all at once,
Mm.
everywhere all at once. So keep in mind, while you're still doing studio, you also have other classes going on outside of it. I was
Mm-hmm.
taking a entrepreneurship minor,
Mm-hmm.
so I had that class going on with its own different kind of final going on, in addition to the studio final. And then in addition to that, this is like a fortunate, but also looking back on it, it was like, ah, man, why'd I say yes? Is we were presenting to do the fourth year competition, which is the Mako competition.
Mm-hmm.
And out of nowhere, I was nominated by my studio to represent our specific studio in that competition.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even kidding you. I had to walk around in the hallways after hearing that news just to contemplate if I wanted to do it or not. Because I knew how stressed out I was already with just getting it done for the final presentation.
Mm-hmm.
But two, I still had like two or three other finals that I had to do. And I also had a final for a seminar with Professor Steinfeld, who also ran this competition. What was the problem is all of this was just happening all at once. So me knowing all the deadlines of the projects that were still on my calendar and
Mm-hmm.
now contemplating accepting this competition was going to come with another whole string of things
Yeah.
and my birthday all being on the same freaking day. I'm like, there's no way I should not accept this. This is such
Yeah.
a bad idea.
Yeah.
So I accepted it and I just absolutely buried myself
Dude, I remember
alive with
Ryan. It
just
was.
work.
I remember you being at that point. I was like, oh my god, this man, he is overworking himself to death right now. Like
And
he.
mind you, too, we've had 6 semesters now of project deadlines, production weeks, all nighter experiences, and whatever else, and just balancing other classes during those times, too.
Mm-hmm.
This, by far, was the busiest, the most overworked, the hardest I've ever worked in my life to
Mm-hmm.
this day. And that was
Yeah.
3, 4 years ago.
Yeah. And it was like, I think at that time too, you were helping me try to reincarnate Nomos at the same time.
Yeah. So it's just. It was so bad. And I just like I wanted to give up so badly. It wasn't even like a dropout. It was just like I want to give up. Like I can't do this. That there's just too much and I can't do it. And if I can't do it, I'm gonna fail. And if I fail, I'm not redoing any of these things. I'm not going through a fourth year again.
Yeah.
So I was just ready. At the drop of the hat, as someone said, you know what? Do you want to drop out? We'll just give you something else to do. I'm like, yes. Please. Just
Anything
get me
but
out of
this.
this.
Yeah.
Anything.
No, I remember my specific moment of feeling like I wanted to drop out. It wasn't necessarily drop out like yours. It was more of like, if I'm going to do architecture, I need to be creative. But because of the situation and the environment I was in, I always had the creative block. We were stuck in the
Mm.
basement with no natural light. The ceiling's like 8 feet tall, and like every other studio would be like 15 feet tall ceilings. Second
Yeah.
floor would be like freaking two two stories high ceilings, and so much natural light. The floor
Hmm.
is like wooden, and like you got natural wooden floors, and then the
So
basement's
you
like
first and second years out there, be grateful for your studio right now because you won't get that in your fourth and fifth year.
no, for real. The floor was kind of like a Frankenstein patchwork of concrete with random aggregates for each like patchwork. It looked like it was just like the
Mm.
most wonky thing I've ever been in, and it just didn't make me feel passionate about designing and make me feel creative. And I didn't realize how much the environment really affects you and how you view your design and how you design and how you approach life. But that specific semester, I was like, I understand why people want a better life. This shit sucks. Yeah.
Yeah,
It
just
was not fun. And what made it worse was that during a specific time of the day, there would be like this really sharp, it was during winter, there'd be this really sharp sunlight coming in on my computer, and then it would just shine in my eye the whole time. And I'm like, what the fuck? And so,
so then, oh yeah, because that's funny to bring up too. Because already with the super small windows, now you have people purposely putting cardboard on the window to prevent themselves from going blind.
yeah.
So now your windows are like it used to be 2 feet wide, and now they're just like a tiny 1 foot by 1 foot of window remaining.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's what we mean
So
by
it was
like
just
there's no
bad.
more natural light coming in because during winter, no one wanted those lights to go put a glare in their computer on their monitors, and so they just cover up the whole window, and so there's no more light coming in.
I think we transitioned now into so what kept us going. And for mine, it was very simple, very easy. Italy, baby. We got vacation in the middle of our freaking schooling. So that was like the greatest freaking hard work to reward I've ever experienced. Whereas,
Yeah.
because for multiple reasons, we already talked about this in our study abroad episode. Italy is
Mm-hmm.
just chill. It's
Yeah.
so chill. It's the best feeling after grinding away
Mm-hmm.
because now everything's relaxed. The culture there is already relaxed, and you're just vibing the whole
Yeah.
time. So that was literally just make it through this semester of pain so you can live in the next one in paradise. And that was it. That was it.
No, I think my specific reason why I stayed in there was also so before fourth year, we never really understood how buildings were made or like how it's going to get built. Because we would
Yeah.
always just have like rule of thumbs, make sure your roof is thicker than you intend it to be, because then that's how much
Hmm.
like stuff you'll need to have. Um, that type of stuff, right? Like rule of thumbs. And the fourth year, we came in and was like, okay, we're gonna go into design development. We're gonna actually design this building so that it's gonna get built. And so that was really interesting to me because I never, bro, I had no experience in doing that, and that was really fun. Another thing that made me kept going was during that semester, I had interviewed with one of the best firms out there, and they
Yeah.
got back to me
Mr.
and
Big Shot.
no, they came back to me and they were like, "We want you," and I was like, "I want you." And so I got to experience Seattle.
DTF?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They sent me the text. I was like, I'm down. But I got to experience Seattle and just like how beautiful it is during summer, and made some really amazing friends that I still keep on contact with to this day because they were just amazing human beings and just great
They're
designers
cool
in
people.
general. Yeah, dude, they're the most amazing people I've ever met. That's what made me stick, was because of, by the power of friendship, they they made me stick through architecture.
Man, that was such a short section. Fourth year got like 2 minutes.
Well, because like it was,
I mean, what else? Yeah, what is there to say?
we've been through everything, and so we're like, this shit's light work.
Yeah, it's like, how much more can you throw at me? And they're like, oh, we got a lot more. Throws another wrench. Okay, fifth year. We're almost there. The finish line is right in front of us. We can almost taste the diploma in our hands. Except it's not, because they don't actually give you the diploma on graduation. But metaphorically, we're almost there. We can see the
Yeah.
sunlight finally. We're emerging from the basement. And we're finally at our fifth year. So with fifth year too comes another unique situation, because one, now you just came back from wherever you were abroad. If you weren't even study abroad, you were off an internship at some completely different place for a whole semester. So everyone is coming back with this pre-built-in senioritis feeling of, we just tasted freedom for an entire semester, and
Mhm.
now you're telling us to come back and go back into what we used to go to. That's a hard
Nah.
sell. That's a hard sell.
Yeah.
Double entendre. But yeah. So with that too, the unique challenge is we also have one professor. So if you, this is like a really big, like, make it or break it moment when you're deciding
Yeah.
for your preferences for the semester or for the studio, because now you have them for the entire year. There's no longer like the, oh, I hated my first or I hated my first professor, so hopefully the second one's better. It's now,
Mhm.
if you don't like them, sucks, you're stuck with them. Or if you love them, congrats, you got them for all year.
Yeah.
So with that too, unfortunately, I mean, it was way less dramatic, way less toxic than third year. But I ended up with one of those situations where Professor and I did not vibe. We just, for whatever reason, things just weren't great. I was back on number one target. I was the
Yeah.
op. The professor was the op. Who knows? But it wasn't working out. And a lot of the things was just like, it was always just petty behavior and just a lot of other stuff where even people around me in my studio were saying like, what is his problem? Like, why is he,
Yeah.
like, what is
Can
his
you
issue? I'm
can
like,
you tell them
I
this?
don't know.
Can you tell them the story about like you going to some place for like 1 minute, and then he was like, he was wondering where you were.
Yeah, okay. So here's the other thing. So we had our career fair, and it's our fifth year. This is arguably the most important career fair we have, because this is our first full-time job. So
Mhm.
he knows this too. He knows that the career fair is happening. He knows people are staying back to talk to certain others, but he still expects people to come in to talk about their projects and pin them up and talk about it. And that
Mhm.
part was annoying, because now it's whatever you were going to do, you still have to come back to studio at like 3 o'clock or something.
Mhm.
So all of us were hanging out together at the career fair after it was starting to wrap up, and we're like, man, we haven't eaten all day. We should at least get like some food before we get back to campus. So we grabbed our
Mhm.
sandwiches from wherever the heck we got them from. And then I just
Firehouse.
see a text come in. Yeah, I just see a text come in from my thesis project partner, Reggie, and he's like, hey, Professor Maze Runner is asking where you're at. I'm like, this dude. And he's like, we're just grabbing some food. I'm like, on my way to campus as we speak. True. Like, we were walking back
Mhm.
to campus right then.
Yep.
And then he was saying like, okay, be here like as soon as possible. He's starting to get pissed. I'm like, what is this, like, what do you want me to do? So I walk in, I finally get there. I set my stuff down. I see Reggie has our boards pinned up on the wall ready to talk about it.
Mhm.
And I know, I'm like, okay, I can get it. Like, we're technically a bit later than 3 o'clock. It's like 3:15 or something. That's our bad.
Mhm.
Like, what are we supposed to do?
Mhm.
So I was fully ready. I'm like, cool. Let's just, like, we're all professionals here, right? We can just move on, move past it, and just talk quickly through these things so we can move on to the next person. No, this dude had to go out of his way to say, all right, Reggie, walk me through your project, not our project. Walk me through your project. And then he got through done saying whatever he was going to say. And he's like, oh, yeah, then Ryan can talk about this part. It's like, I don't want to hear it from Ryan right now. I'm like, bruh? Did this dude just say this? A
God,
professor?
dude, that's toxic. The passive aggressiveness right
Yo.
now.
Literally, I'm like, I cannot believe I just heard what I heard. I'm like, you know what? I mosquitoes at this point. I dealt with Professor Hits different. This is nothing. This is like a toddler slapping your knee and being like, fuck are you doing? So I'm just like, fine. If he doesn't want to talk to me, I literally just stand here like a zombie and just wait for him to say, all right, we're done talking. I can actually get back to my work. The audacity.
Oh yeah.
And the fact that this is why it stung so much too, because some of you might be like, well, Ryan, why are you complaining for? No, the reason why this is a big deal, and other people in my studio also co-sign how stupid this was, because he was getting on me because I was quote unquote late after having the event that everybody knew about.
Yeah.
That could run late, that could interfere with a lot of these plans. It was known that this could be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yet this man persisted and insisted that no, this is a problem. You need to be on time every single time. You need to show up to the studio. There's no excuses.
Mm-hmm.
But strangely enough, 1:30 is when our studio starts, right? Everybody always in their seats. At the latest, 1:27. When would this dude walk through the door? Not 1:29. Not 1:30. Not even 1:31. It'd be like 1:40, 1:45. And then he'd drop his stuff off and say, oh, I had to pick some stuff up. I'll be back real quick. And then come back at 2 o'clock or something. So like the audacity for this dude to say, I'm late and I can't get talked to because I didn't listen. Bro. I saw it too. I was looking around the studio and everyone was like wide-eyed, like, what are this? Are you serious? So I guess that wasn't really a dropout moment, but it's like, God, why that the 50-50 coin flip, and I had to get this kind of professor. All right,
Yeah.
I guess it's gonna be that kind of final year. To hell with it. Let's just get through it.
Yeah.
We play ball.
I also had something not to that extent. I think mine was along the same toxic route too. My professor just took everything so personally to the point like it felt like my grades were being held hostage, my career was being held hostage. It felt like at any moment he could give me a C or a D or an F, where anything he says, he's tenured too, and so anything he says could just make me end my whole career right then and there. And so, and he would always just talk to me and our studio, be like, "You're not good designers. You don't know how to draw. You don't know how anything works in architecture." I mean, fair, like we're fifth years, we should know a little bit more, but apparently we don't know anything at all with architecture. We don't even know what a section is. We don't know what a plan is. We don't know anything about architecture. And he just kept insisting that we don't know anything. And to that point where everyone in the studio is like fed up with his bullshit, and because every time what happened in the studio is that he just asked the most vague questions that has multiple answers, but when you tell him an answer, that could be true, he's like, no, that's not the right answer. And it's like, what the fuck, like, why don't you make the question more specific?
Why are you booing me? I'm right.
We told you the correct answer. Why do you insist that it's not the correct answer? And it's like the most stupid thing ever. And so the whole semester, the whole year, we would always sit in the front of the class. We would be gathered in a circle, and instead of asking things about, what design is, like things that make us like interested about architecture and makes us like passionate about architecture, he would just sit there in front of the class, just kept talking about himself that had nothing to do with architecture. And I'm at the point where like I'd rather have Professor Hot Dog at this point, because at least he doesn't degrade us, berate us like this. There's no reason why he needs to do this type of thing at all. And so I'm just like, you know what, frick it. And so at that point, actually, the end of the first semester, fifth year, I was hanging out with Ryan, Abby, and like the room crew and some other people from our studio. And I remember I was just silent the whole time, and I cried, like tears dropping down my eyes. I was just tired. I was just tired of everything. And yeah, I was
like the exhaustion tears.
Yeah, I was just tired of everything. I actually felt like I was gonna drop out on my last year. And
which
so
is wild.
Yeah. And it was just like every single day he was just always degrading us and just demeaning. It wasn't even just about the design anymore. It was like us as a person.
Yeah. Like studio shouldn't feel like a war ground. It's not that serious, for one. But two, you're supposed to be a professional, and you can't talk to a person constructively with criticism or anything in a proper manner, something that's at least respectful,
Mm-hmm.
or at the very least, just, humane.
It was just that was the lowest of the lows because I've never had a professor like that before. Like, you had Professor Hits
It's
different
different,
that was like reacting that way to you, but she never reacted that way to me, and so I
right?
never really felt that same thing that you did. But the day that I felt that from for fifth year, I was like, okay, I understand where Ryan's coming from. And at that point, we all have the same friends that was in the same studio, but for me, it didn't feel like we had the same camaraderie as we had in third year, where I felt like I could, you know, just march along and just hopefully this will end this semester, and but for my case, it was like for the whole year. And so
Yeah.
I was really debating if I should just keep continue for the next semester as well.
Yeah. It's just, yeah, it really sucks because all you can do, since I had experienced that technically 3 times, it was Professor Hits different in third year. Fourth year, it was the third professor that would come in that always had an issue with me for some reason. The other two didn't. They were like, yeah, great, you're doing some great stuff. But Professor number 3 in that just had some vendetta against me every single time. And then go on to fifth year, and that professor just started to take a liking to just always being sharp on me for something. It was
Mm-hmm.
just, to a certain point, it's like immune to it, because it's
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I get it. There's gonna be haters in every single form. You usually think of haters from like the internet and stuff, just
Mm-hmm.
people trolling in comments or something. You
Yeah.
never really think it's gonna be people higher up than you
Mm-hmm.
who are like wiser supposedly, who are more professional supposedly, who are like all these things, and
Yeah.
you see that kind of toxic behavior thrown in front of your face and held above you because now they have power against you,
Yeah.
and you can't do anything about it. All you can do is literally smile and wave and just get back to work and just put on your customer service face and just get through the time until they walk out of the studio.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so hard to deal with that. I don't think people get enough credit who have to deal with toxic professors. It
Mm-hmm.
seriously is such an issue in architecture school, and more people need to be aware of this and need to stick up against these things in a way that will actually do something about it.
Yeah.
Only recently have we heard some situations where a certain professor had
Yeah.
finally gotten ramifications for things that they had been doing that have were not cool.
Yeah.
And we won't put too much details on that because that's not for us to disclose really, but just know students and their voices do have power behind them if
Mm-hmm.
you stick together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's just, yeah, unfortunately that's just a part of architecture school right now, and it's
Mm-hmm.
so difficult to get through. And really encourage people to just lean on their friends, lean on their support group as much as possible, because like we were talking about in all these semesters, really that's kind of the only thing that got me through. And like Albert was just saying, so
Yeah.
sometimes just that is enough,
Yeah.
and is the only thing you really can do, unfortunately. I think that it's pretty clear of why we chose to keep going, because we're that close. We're that close to getting our diploma.
One
You'd
semester left.
be ooga booga brain to just not get your diploma because you're literally right there.
Yeah.
After all these years,
Yep.
why would you not just suck it up and just walk across the stage?
Yep.
So, unfortunately, I don't think we can have too much extra for you beyond
Yeah.
that. But I do want to try and talk about some other like specific moments that weren't really like pertain to only second year or only this semester or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
because I think these are also some moments that are really hard hitting and pinpointed in the process that hopefully are relatable to some other people listening to this right now too. And I don't want to go too much further along in this episode, so we'll cut it soon after this. But I think some other moments that really hit for me was just those production weeks, basically pulling all nighters. We're just stuck in a laser cutter room at like
Mm-hmm.
4 in the morning.
Yeah.
It just hits different in the wrong way. Like I don't really feel much of like the quote unquote depression feelings or anything else, but those moments make me really second guess and doubt a lot of what am I doing, man?
Mm-hmm.
This is stupid for a model that they'll look at for 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here at 4 in the morning watching a laser cutter cut 15,000 fucking rectangles. This is, oh my God. And then I have to put those rectangles together right after this. Oh, man.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, just other parts of like, the professors, like we said, them assigning things last minute, that always is irritating.
Yeah. Okay, what I do enjoy sometimes is that whenever you do stay in late, sometimes you have like those people who are staying in with you. Sometimes those people surprise you with their personalities
That
because
is a lot of fun. There is a
yeah,
certain all-nighter culture that not that is really great to condone it or anything, but
yeah,
there's something special in that sauce.
yeah. Maybe it's because everyone's delusional at that point where like they're they're
Yeah,
just they're just like letting
sleep
themselves
drunk or
go.
whatever. Yeah,
Yeah, it's just there's something memorable about those moments that you enjoy. But I do remember one specific moment with the fifth year, right? I do remember that I at some point after the first semester, I was just like, you know what? The only person that can hurt me is a person who I let in, and so at that point, I'm not letting anyone in. I'm just gonna keep rolling by and doing my own
yeah.
thing. And so that was a
No, yeah, that
big
reminds
moment for
me
me.
of the thing. I don't remember like how we came about this, but I remember us talking about this a lot in third year, where we started to develop this mantra where it's like, it's only a big deal if you let it be a big deal.
Yeah.
And honestly, as stupid and corny as that sounds, it actually worked pretty well for a lot of things. Whether it was nerves about a presentation, like, oh my God, I'm so anxious. What am I going to talk about? How are they going
Mhm.
to react to my project? And then if you remind yourself, like, hey, it's only a big deal if you make it a big deal. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. And then you're like, so this is my project. There you go. And you're like, wow, that was actually kind of easy. And then works
Yeah.
with things too, where professor bullying you all the freaking time. You're like, you know what? Forget this. I'm not gonna let it get me down this time.
No, but
They're just mosquitoes.
tell me
Just
why
mosquitoes.
a
They're buzzing
70
around you. Just slap them around and be like, not having it. I don't care.
why
Go
are
somewhere
like
else.
70 and 60-year-old men and women are like bullying 20-year-olds? Like what?
Dude, come on. Yeah. Beyond those things too, some other specific things that just were really good moments to just keep us going. Where like we were talking about our support groups, but also doing things with those support groups. We would always go to these wineries on the weekends or like Friday nights. We'd all be like, hey, you guys going to the winery? You're like, oh yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
So then those would just be great moments where you could just like, we called it like wine and or yeah, wine and wine, like
Yeah.
the drink and also just like ranting.
Mwah.
So those are really nice because it felt healthy to just vent out the
Yeah.
frustration.
Yeah,
And our oh yeah,
especially
go
when
ahead.
you're stuck in a environment where like I said in the basement, and then all of a sudden on that Friday night you go to the wineries, you see the vineyard, you see the sun setting down, there's like a really cool architecture that you're like underneath, and it's just the vibe is there, and you're just like, oh dude, this is why I'm in architecture, this is why I'm with my
Yeah.
friends.
And then yeah, we talked about like the high-low days and all that. Just simple things like grabbing burgers routinely after a certain class with your friends. That also is really fun because it's another way of checking in with each other and just having some updates on each other's lives and whatever else.
Hmm.
Since you're all in different studios and stuff at this point. And yeah, I think some other things, at least for me, specific moments that really stood out in a positive way was that Manko presentation day. Even though
Hmm.
I was just talking about like how horrible that was, it's probably like the worst moment of my life. It was still so cool just to have that moment of presenting in front of a bunch of
Hmm.
people, almost like a TED talk. It felt like
Yeah.
so. It was cool to almost have that validation, if you will, where
Hmm.
your work was at that level to be worthy, I guess, of
Yeah.
competing with all these other students, and you're showing the entire school what you did.
Yeah.
I think
I
that's kind of yeah.
I imagine it to be like similar to A Way of Water when the dad says to his to his son was like, "I see you, I see you."
Yeah, yeah. Beyond that, we have one more announcement before we close out. But I do want to do some final takeaways, and we'll allude to the next steps of what the Crit Room podcast is going to be next season.
My final takeaway, which I learned from my fifth year, which was probably when it was way too late, but I learned that, like I said earlier, you can only let people hurt you if you let them hurt you. So
To a certain degree,
yeah,
yeah.
with words at least. Don't let them in, and just keep doing you because you are the best, and you are the reason why some people are out there doing what they love.
Yeah. I'm gonna cheat. I'm gonna have two. One of them is what Albert was just talking about at the end, where just simple things like a support group in your studio and just doing simple things like eating a burger with some friends and just, or in this case, going to IHOP can miraculously somehow change a person's mind from wanting to drop out to sticking with it.
Hmm.
And it's just a reminder that even though you may not think it's that big of a deal, to someone else, it really is in
Hmm.
both ways, positive and negative. So just always being there to support each other and walk them through your own experiences is really, really, really impactful in a way that you just won't recognize until later, possibly.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. The second takeaway I want to say is this may not sound like the most flashy thing or the most hoorah whatever, but I think a really important thing is to keep yourself going, to keep yourself motivated through your own school experience. Is just understanding what you want to get out of your experience at
Hmm.
school, or just thinking in the future for yourself and your career, right? Like, is your goal really oriented towards architecture? Because in that case, it is kind of like that carrot on the stick that you had to chase all the way until your final year of school. And for me, that was a lot of my experience. I knew I wanted that degree because I wanted to be an architect someday. And the only way to get there is to finish school. And it's not the great, like I was saying, it's not the greatest of things, but it is the reality of a lot of people's
Hmm.
situations where, yeah, it sucks. Everyone has a situation where architecture school sucks for them, but it's just how badly do you want to make it to where you think you want to go. And I
Hmm.
think that is typically what keeps people in versus dropping out, is
Hmm.
what is your end goal, what is the end game.
Hmm. Agreed.
So yeah, well, cool. Are people out there in our community who are curious about what's happening next on the Curtain Podcast? Because yes, this is sadly our last episode for the season, but do not worry, do not fret, we are coming back with, honestly, I mean, Albert, you can say it too. But honestly, I'm way more excited about what's happening next season. And I'm not just saying that to hype it up. I genuinely am like very excited about what's happening next season and what we're planning on talking about, what we have plans already. Oh
Hmm.
man. It's
Yeah.
just like, this is kind of just our teaser, honestly. Even though we already had a season one, this kind of feels like the new season one for us. We're all just testing out new things and all
Yeah.
this stuff. And you can see from our different episodes, we're tinkering with some ideas here and there and
Yeah.
sprinkling some other stuff.
Yeah. We're learning a lot of things right now, and we're super excited for the next things that are coming up in the future. There's gonna be some big things that you don't want to miss out, and it's gonna be exciting.
Yes. And we'll give you just a little taste. And for those of you who are like very detail oriented, you might have already picked up on this already. But if you look at our Instagram bio, you may have noticed that it's changed, and it isn't on accident. Our bio is what we're going to be transitioning into. So if you kind of want to know what it's about, check our Instagram and you'll know
Follow,
exactly what we're talking about.
follow.
Please. That is another thing. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone too. Thank you so much for supporting our show. We've grown crazy from whatever I thought we would expect. You know, we almost 2.5 times our
Yeah.
followers on Instagram within a single season, which is crazy to me. We've had incredible, I don't know what you want to say, access, but like we've had incredible collabs with people who I didn't even think we'd be able to talk to until we had at least like 1,000 subscribers or something,
Mhm.
you know? So just the opportunities that we already had at essentially, ground zero for the
Yeah.
podcast is already super cool. And the fact that we're starting to see a lot of return faces in our comments and just our messages and stuff and our DMs and everything, a lot of that really does go a long way. It keeps us passionate about keeping this going.
But yeah, I think our next goal for next semester would be to reach 5,000 followers on Instagram. So if you guys have friends out there that you think this would be valuable to them, share it with them. Literally share every episode that you think is interesting or uninteresting. Just, if you think it's boring, or just roast us with your friends. Maybe then they'll be like, talk. Then maybe they'll check it out at some point. We'll see how it goes. But watch our reels, hit the like button, share all those different things, follow us, comment on every single thing. But yeah, if you have an underclassman, share the podcast to them because they
Yeah.
might not know the ins and outs of architecture, and we'll definitely help them.
Yes. And this isn't just us trying to grow just for the sake of growing. We need a larger community to start to do the cool things that we have planned. And we simply can't do that until we have enough people to do the thing, if that makes sense. We're trying to keep it vague because we want to keep it exciting, but trust us, we want to see this community grow a lot more and be a lot more engaged with each other, because that's when we're starting to creep into what the real true mission of the Career Podcast is meant to be.
Yeah.
And we're curious, again, like we say in pretty much every single episode, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your DMs. We want to hear your comments, positive and negative, critiques and praises or whatever, all of it.
Yeah.
Ideas that you want us to talk about, some things that you think we are lacking on the knowledge of or don't talk about enough, literally anything. We're here for you.
Yeah, we have some big things happening for you, but we need your help to do it. So
Yes.
make sure you share, follow, all these different things.
So to wrap this up, where can you find us during the break? Instagram and YouTube. We're going to hopefully get this podcast season 2 and season 3 posted on a bunch of other platforms. So if you know friends who have been waiting for Apple Podcast or Google Podcast or whatever that's called, it's coming very soon. We're working on it, okay? And our plan, at least right now, we try to match these up with your guys' semester. So once it gets closer to the fall semester, just keep an eye out of it more, and we'll tell you when first episode of the next season will drop. But in the meantime, I've been your host, Ryan, with my co-host
Albert, just Albert.
And thank you guys for watching the Korean Podcast, and see you in the next episode. And don't forget to save.
Don't forget to save. Bye bye.